With kicking techniques, it's possible to execute decisive techniques even when at a large distance from your opponent. Moreover, since the progression of the technique is from down to up, you can take advantage of the opponent's blind spot to attack him. On the other hand, since you are standing on one leg when kicking, you tend to lose your balance and are slow to react to his attack, which creates openings. Kicking techniques require practice so that you are able to move as quickly as possible from beginning to end. Front kick. It's important in Mai-Geri that you position your hips as far forward as possible. From the proper posture leaning forward, you bend your knee quickly. When bending your kicking knee, do so as if you were executing Hisageri, knee kicking, obliquely forward. Here, your supporting leg should be bent. You stretch the supporting leg forward as you bend your knee, and using the power generated, you thrust your hips forward. Your upper body should not lean backward over the ankle of your supporting leg. Notice that at the instant you begin to move, your supporting leg is bent slightly forward. In this manner, you are able to fully use the stretching power of the leg. When kicking, you develop power in your lower abdomen, and then, with the knee joint as your fulcrum, you move as if kicking off the lower part of your leg. Let's look here at the decisive point of a kick where the leg is bent. You execute the kick, producing instantaneous impact without changing the position of your knee. Lowering your knee causes unnecessary motion, which will delay your attack. Now let's look at the change of line of Maigeri. Here you avoid your opponent's Geidan Uke, lower block, and execute a kick and step forward without your leg returning, as in Keikomi. If you don't bend your knee enough, it's likely to be caught by your opponent. Thus, it's important to bend your knee fully. In Kumite, don't kick to a predetermined point as you would in practice, but try to improve your technique so that you become able to find an opening in your opponent's defense. Kick freely based on an instantaneous judgment of the situation. Front kick with front leg. The utility of this technique is that you can reach your objective more quickly due to the nearness of your kicking leg, front leg, to your opponent. Moreover, since your initial movement is small, your kicking leg is positioned in the blind spot of your opponent, and he will have difficulty blocking you. Close the distance between your front and back legs as much as possible, and lower your hips, which should be facing forward. Be sure that you extend your back leg and thrust your hips forward fully. When kicking, it's important that your front arm be placed toward the upper body of your opponent. Position your supporting leg firmly and shift your center of gravity forward. The last part of the kick is executed in the same manner as in Maigeri. Now, let's look at the method of practicing Kizami Maigeri. First, just the kick. Next, you add Jodanzuki, upper punching, to the kick. When you are able to execute this movement smoothly, you will be able to kick and punch simultaneously. Practice repeatedly, making sure you expand and contract your body, extend your back leg, and thrust your hips forward while paying attention to your hand position. Next, you practice with a partner. Study these points while keeping in mind what we have learned so far. Switch over front kick with front leg. By switching your front leg to the rear, you are simultaneously able to avoid the attack of your opponent and execute Maigeri. This technique is effective when you draw out his attack by closing the distance in order to make him commit himself fully. Here, you use maigeri as kizami-geri when your attacker is close. The instant your opponent moves, you withdraw your front leg while your back leg comes forward. The instant you switch legs, you have completed preparations to attack. After executing the technique, it's important to immediately move away from your opponent and remain in an alert state, zanshin. Roundhouse kick. Mawashi-geri is a variation of mai-geri and is a comparatively new technique. One of the advantages of this kick is that you can attack your opponent from the side by surprise and can change the distance with your hips. Effective use of this technique will generate great power due to the rotational force of the hips and the spring of the knee and hip joints. In actual Kumite practice, you bend your knee as if to strike your opponent with the top of your knee. This protects you from being attacked by your opponent. You extend your back leg and thrust your hips forward in the same manner as for maigeri. You should plant the bottom of your pivot foot as though it were stuck to the floor and never raise it. Shift your center of gravity forward off of your pivoting leg. Don't forget to bend your pivot leg and be sure not to open your body too much. Now let's take a look at the decisive point of the kick from a bent knee position. You use the spring of the knee without changing its position. If you lower your knee, this will cause unnecessary motion and your attack will be delayed. Execute 3 consecutive movements, that is, a front kick, roundhouse kick, and rear roundhouse kick. The purpose of this practice is to learn to allocate power properly in order to make a smooth transition from one technique to another, and also to train the pivoting foot to develop a sense of balance. Roundhouse kick with front kick. Taking a gyakugamae, opposite stance, you draw out your opponent's attack and then, switching your legs, you execute a counterattack, being sure to be far enough away so that he can't attack. This Joda Mawashi Geri is effective when the distance is slightly larger than for Kizami Mai Geri, front kick with the front leg. Notice that you draw your front leg back an additional foot's length more than for Kizami Mai Geri. The basic points to keep in mind are the same as for Kirikai no Kizami Mai Geri. The most important point is that when you switch your legs, you must be sure to immediately shift your center of gravity to your pivoting foot. When switching legs, be careful not to lean backwards or move your center of gravity over your heel. Note well the differences in leg movements as the distance changes. This is true not only for this technique, but for techniques in general, and we hope that this videotape will teach you to prepare yourself for a counterattack immediately after kicking, and to assume an attacking stance. Upper roundhouse kick from front kick feint. In this technique, You feign a maigeri attack to your opponent to draw him into a geidan barai, lower block position. You then execute a roundhouse kick to his upper body when the opening appears. There are two ways of feinting. For the first, you execute a small maigeri, and for the second, you draw out your opponent by executing hizageri, knee kick. The important point is that you must completely draw out your opponent with your feint. When you change your technique from a front kick to a roundhouse kick, it's important to execute the kick naturally, without pulling or lowering your knee. Slipping in short roundhouse kick. In this technique, you avoid your opponent's attack by sliding in off the line of attack the instant he steps forward. You execute Mawashigeri to his midsection, Chudan. You adjust the distance by stepping with your supporting leg. The instant you slide into the side of your opponent with your front leg as your support, you execute a kick. Enter with your whole body as if to crash into him. If you allow your hips to rise, this technique will be ineffective. If the distance is too close, this will also render the technique ineffective. After kicking, you should be behind his back in an alert stance. Inside roundhouse kick, instep. For this technique, you execute an unexpected attack from inside your opponent's stance. Now let's look at a situation where you are in close to your opponent. You execute a kick using your instep. If you lean too far backward, you will be pushed off balance by your opponent. Therefore, you should shift your center of gravity forward and execute a kick to the upper, middle, or lower part of your opponent's body, depending on the case. Next, let's see how this technique is used in each situation. One technique is Geidan Mawashigeri, lower roundhouse kick, followed by Jodan Kekomi, upper through kick, a two-stage Nidan technique. Also, although not shown here, there is Geidan Uramawashigeri, lower inside roundhouse kick, followed by the Jodan-ski upper punch attack, which is very effective in Kumite. Upper inside roundhouse kick, Seoul. Next, let's study the case where the sole is used. While avoiding your opponent's attack, you execute a kick to the back of his head or back while looking over your shoulder. You turn your hips completely from the inside and execute a kick using the full power of the attacking leg. You then pull your kicking leg back with the feeling you are hitting your sole against the inside of your thigh. Rear kick. This is an attacking technique executed with your back to your opponent. With your hips serving as your center, kick with a spin using the twisting power of the hips. Here you use your heel. Make sure that the toes of your kicking leg are pointing downward toward the floor. You bend your supporting leg slightly as in Zenkutsudachi, but the bend is less extreme than in Maigiri. The instant you turn your back, you look over your shoulder to see the object of your attack. Here at the moment of kicking, you visually confirm your target. Your kick extends straight from the bent position as if you were rubbing your other knee. When attacking the middle part of your opponent's body, make every effort to keep your upper body parallel to the floor. Notice the change in the degree of the lean of your upper body as you shift the attack from the lower to the upper part of his body. Next, let's look at how the leg movement differs in an actual fighting situation depending on the distance. The important point in the rear kick is to choose an appropriate maai, or distance. You should repeatedly practice to acquire a sense of distance and timing. Here is a look at the rear kick while avoiding the kizamizuki, jab. Try to imitate the leg movements presented here. This is the rear kick while avoiding the gyakuzuki, reverse punch. While driving your opponent back with uraken, punch with the back of the hand, you execute a rear kick. Here is a series of comparisons of leg movements for different distances. Study them over and over again. Freestyle Kumite. What should your mind be focused on while engaged in a match with an opponent? Here are some key points for competition presented by Masahiko Tanaka himself. Here the distance is slightly closer than in a normal match. By intentionally letting him execute techniques, you accustom yourself to his attacks and wait for the moment to launch a decisive technique of your own. You close the distance while pressuring him, and when he comes to attack you, draw back. By repeating this strategy, you learn what technique your opponent is trying to execute from what distance. You also learn to understand his timing. If you keep drawing back without pressuring him in order to preserve a safe distance, on the contrary, this will make it easier for him to attack you. When you withdraw, instead of moving back a little, you should draw back far enough so that he can't reach you. Don't forget to remain alert at that time. When you expose your midsection intentionally to draw him out, he will come to attack you. Here you execute a counterpunch while parrying his attack. Continue to apply pressure until he is forced to change his stance. The moment he switches his stance, you execute your technique with full power. picture, you are shaking your wrist. The purpose of this is to establish a rhythm from the line of your hand through your shoulder to your chest, rather than through the center of your body. In this case, you pick up your opponent's rhythm by using your relaxed fingertips. When adopting the proper distance, just before executing a technique, you close the distance with your back leg while leaving your front leg as it is. Masahiko Tanaka accomplished the feat of winning the All Japan Karate Association Championship and the IAKF World Karate Championship in succession. His work on behalf of karate has been outstanding. The techniques of this 46-year-old master never decline. It's not the speed and power of his technique alone which are responsible for his strength. It's due to his indomitable fighting spirit, his superb ability to sense the appropriate moment to attack, and his skill in adopting the correct distance. Please study these points which are explained in the description of free Kumite.